If your brain feels slower, foggier, or less motivated than last year, this video could explain everything because these changes aren't random and they're definitely not just aging. Something real happens inside your brain when burnout builds up, and once you understand it, you can finally start to reset. Hi, I'm Dr. Lexi, a certified functional medicine practitioner and pharmacist, and I help overwhelmed professionals and parents who are dealing with brain fog, anxiety, fatigue, focus issues, and memory struggles finally get their mental clarity and energy back. And if you've been feeling like your brain just isn't firing the way it used to, even after trying medication, supplements, or lifestyle changes, you are in the right place. Today, we're going to break down what's actually happening inside your brain when you hit burnout and what needs to happen biologically for you to feel like yourself again. So when most people think about burnout, they think about feeling tired or overwhelmed or like they just need a weekend off. But what most people don't realize is that chronic stress literally changes the structure and function of your brain, not metaphorically, not emotionally, physically. So let me explain what I mean without getting too nerdy about it, but I probably am not going to be able to help myself. So when you've been under long-term stress, whether it's work pressure, parenting overload, constant decision-making, or even low-grade inflammation in the body, your brain starts shifting into survival mode. And survival mode is brilliant for protecting you in short bursts, but it's absolutely terrible for things like memory, focus, creativity, and motivation. And here's why. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that's responsible for focus and decision making, it actually gets suppressed. And this is why you can stare at your computer screen and not remember what you were doing, or reread an email 5 times, or feel like simple tasks take way more energy than they should. When cortisol stays elevated for too long, it essentially tells the prefrontal cortex, hey, step aside. We can't think about the future right now. We need to focus on surviving the right now. So in the simplest sense, your sharp thinking becomes dull thinking. Then your hippocampus, the memory center, becomes overstressed. This is the part of the brain that helps you remember words, conversations, where you left your keys, and that thing that you meant to tell your spouse. Yeah, that too. Under long-term stress, the hippocampus doesn't store memories as efficiently, and it can actually begin to shrink. Yes, like physically shrink that we can see on imaging. That's why burnout can feel eerily similar to early cognitive decline, and why so many of my clients say things like, I'm scared something's really wrong with me. You're not imagining it. Something is happening, but it's happening because your brain is overwhelmed, not because it's failing necessarily. Now, chronic stress can feed processes in your body that can develop into more serious cognitive issues, but that's not to say that that's the case for everyone, and I urge you to start working with a functional medicine provider to start diving deeper. And if you want to learn more about how to get started with the number one issue I see in virtually all of my clients, whether it's burnout or true cognitive decline, sign up for my free masterclass with the link in the description below. And if you're hearing weird noises in the background, it is my dog Nokomis just chilling over here in her snoozer pet bed. Then your brain shifts energy away from higher level thinking and toward the stress response. So think of it like your brain's energy budget. Under stress, more and more of that energy gets allocated to dealing with the threat signals, even if the threat is just an overflowing inbox or a toddler tantrum. And that leaves less energy for things like motivation, emotional regulation, memory, problem solving, and even everyday joy. And this is why burnout doesn't only feel exhausting, it feels like you're disconnected from yourself. And finally, the communication between your neurons slows down. Now, neurons are the nerve cells of your brain, but chronic stress increases inflammatory signals in the brain, which makes the synapses, the little connections where the neurons talk to each other, less efficient. And that's the science behind the comments that I hear all the time, like, my brain feels so slow. It takes me forever to switch tasks, and I know what I want to say, but I just can't get the words out. You literally feel like the Wi-Fi in your brain dropped from high-speed fiber to an old-school dial-up connection. But here's the part that nobody tells you. These changes can be reversible. Your brain isn't necessarily stuck like this. It isn't necessarily declining permanently. It's responding to the environment that it's been living in. That makes sense, right? And once you start shifting that environment, your cellular environment is what I'm talking about, your brain can come back online much faster than you'd expect. And yes, that means change, but look where what you've been doing so far got you. You can't expect something to change if nothing changes. Now, stress is a major driver of burnout, but it's not acting alone. There are a few hidden players working behind the scenes that make your brain feel even slower, foggier, and more unmotivated than it should. And most people don't realize how big a role these things play because they build up quietly over time. And you don't notice it happening day by day until suddenly you're like, why can't I think anymore? So let's break down the big three. Number one, inflammation. So we want to think of inflammation like background static. A little bit, your brain can tune it out, but too much for too long, suddenly it feels like your thoughts are swimming through mud. Chronic inflammation from stress, poor sleep, processed foods, blood sugar swings, environmental exposures, you name it, it slows down how efficiently your neurons communicate. And this is why you might notice things like brain fog after eating certain foods, that tired but wired feeling at night, slower thinking, irritability or anxiety spikes, difficulty waking up in the morning, and things like that. It's not because you're getting older. It's because your brain is trying to function in an inflamed environment. Number two, toxin load. Now, when I say toxins, I'm not talking about fancy detox teas or fear-based marketing. I'm talking about everyday exposures that create a heavier workload for your brain and your liver. These are things like fragrances, plastics, polluted air, heavy metals, mold, pesticide residues, and yes, even certain medications and personal care products. Individually, your body can handle all of these things, but over time, the accumulation becomes a problem because your detox pathways get overworked. And when that happens, your brain cells feel sluggish. Your mitochondria, the little tiny energy factories inside your cells, they can't produce ATP or energy as efficiently. And when your brain's energy drops, you feel it pretty much immediately. No motivation, slower recall, a sense of mental heaviness, trouble concentrating, and emotional flatness. It's not a personality flaw. It's biochemistry. And number three, the gut-brain axis. And this is honestly the pathway that nobody checks, and it surprises almost everyone that I talk to. Your gut and your brain are in constant conversation, literally sending messages back and forth all day long. But if your gut is inflamed, imbalanced, or overwhelmed, the messages it sends to your brain are confusing, inflammatory, or just straight up unhelpful. This can show up as things like anxiety out of nowhere, mood swings, brain fog after meals, unpredictable energy, difficulty focusing, or feeling blah or unmotivated. And here's the wild part. About 90% of your serotonin, one of your main mood chemicals, is produced in the gut, not in the brain. So if your gut is struggling, your mood chemistry is struggling. Your motivation is struggling. Your mental clarity is struggling. Most people never connect these dots, so they end up thinking it's a character flaw. Why can't I get my act together? But it's just physiology. So, burnout isn't just stress. It's stress plus inflammation plus toxin accumulation plus gut-brain disruption. Each one pulls a little more energy, a little more focus, a little more memory from your brain until you hit that point where you feel like you're living on about 5% battery, even after resting. The good news is, once you understand what's contributing to the overload, you can start creating the environment your brain needs to reset. Now, before we go any further, I want to say something really important. There is absolutely nothing wrong with therapy, medications, or conventional medical support. For many people, those tools make a real difference. But when it comes to burnout, chronic brain fog, and that feeling of my brain just isn't working like it used to, most traditional approaches only scratch the surface, so it doesn't need to be our only tool in the toolbox. And here's why. They focus on symptoms, not the cellular environment. So if you go to the doctor and say, I can't focus, I'm exhausted, and I feel mentally scattered, the default response is often a stimulant, an SSRI like Zoloft, anxiety medication, or something to help you sleep. And again, these can help, but they don't address what's actually overwhelming your brain cells. They don't lower neuroinflammation, improve mitochondrial energy, repair the gut-brain signaling, reduce toxin load, replenish nutrients needed for neurotransmitters, or rebalance your stress response system. So even if the symptoms get quieter for a while, the root causes are still humming in the background and they can get worse over time. Number 2, they treat burnout like an emotional issue, not a biological one. Most people are told, you're stressed. Try to slow down. This is just a part of getting older. Or you need better self-care. But you and I both know you can meditate, journal, take bubble baths, and go on vacations all day long and still feel burned out the second you come home. Because burnout isn't just about doing too much, although that's definitely part of it. It's about your brain not having the resources that it needs to recover. If your cellular environment is inflamed, depleted, or overwhelmed, no amount of mindset work is going to fix that. Mindset helps, absolutely, and should be a part of how you take care of your body, but biology has to come along for the ride. And lifestyle advice is very well-meaning, but it's not enough on its own. Most people have tried eating healthier, taking a few supplements, exercising when they can, or drinking more water, even switching up their morning routine, and yet their brain fog, exhaustion, and forgetfulness still linger. You know why? Because without knowing the order in which your body needs support, you're basically trying to rebuild a house while the foundation is still cracked. Lifestyle changes matter a lot, but they need to be layered strategically in a way that reduces overload before you try to increase performance. And lastly, nobody connects all the dots for you. This is the frustration I hear over and over from my clients. Everyone looked at one piece. No one looked at the whole picture. One person looks at your mood. Someone else looks at your hormones. Another looks at your gut. Another looks at your stress levels. If you're lucky, by the way, but your brain doesn't experience these things separately. They are all connected. And that's why you can be doing all the right things and still feel off, because nobody has ever shown you how all the pieces work together. And this is where people lose hope unnecessarily. They start to think, I must be broken. Maybe this is just who I am now. Maybe this is early cognitive decline, or I guess I'm just getting old. But the truth is much simpler and much more hopeful. You're not broken. Your biology is simply overwhelmed, and overwhelmed biology can be reset once you understand what's happening underneath the burnout. Okay, so now that we've talked about why burnout feels so heavy and so frustrating, let's shift into something a lot more encouraging, because here's the truth most people don't get to hear. Your brain is designed to repair. It's built for recovery. And even after years of stress, inflammation, or feeling mentally flat, your brain is far more adaptable than you've been led to believe. So let's break this down. Number 1, your brain is always rewiring itself, even right now. This isn't a motivational quote. This is neuroscience. Your brain is constantly creating and strengthening connections based on the signals it receives. This process is called neuroplasticity, and it's one of the biggest reasons burnout is not a permanent state. Even when you feel foggy or depleted, your brain still has the ability to build new pathways that support sharper focus, better memory, calmer moods, more motivation, and clearer decision-making. The challenge isn't whether your brain can adapt, it's whether the environment you're living in allows those healthy pathways to form. And number 2, your brain can actually grow new brain cells. Yes, adults can grow new neurons. I know when I was in school, I was taught that this was not possible, but we have confirmed this is possible, especially in the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory and learning. And this process is called neurogenesis, and it's influenced by things like inflammation, nutrient status, stress levels, mitochondrial energy, and even gut health. And this is why when people shift their internal environment, they often feel sharper within weeks, sometimes sooner, sometimes later, but it's not magic. It's biology operating the way it's supposed to. And number 3, your mitochondria, your brain's energy factories, can recover. When your brain feels slow, is often because your mitochondria aren't producing enough energy to keep up with demand. But mitochondria are incredibly responsive to change. Once the environment is right, they generate energy more efficiently. They reduce oxidative stress. They support healthier neurotransmitter function, and they improve mental stamina. This is why people suddenly feel their motivation come back after addressing the root causes. The brain finally has fuel again. Yay! Number 4, brain inflammation can go down and quickly. Inflammation isn't a personality trait. Hate to break it to you. Actually, I don't hate that. You're welcome. Anyway, but it's not a destiny, it's just a biological state. And when you remove the drivers of inflammation, whether that's stress signals, gut issues, blood sugar swings, or toxin overload, the brain becomes clearer because the static finally quiets down. This is often when people say things like, it feels like someone turned the lights back on. My brain feels awake again, and I didn't even realize how foggy I was until it lifted. This is what happens when the environment changes. And number 5, most importantly, your brain wants to heal. Your brain is always working in your favor, even when it feels like it's shutting down. It's actually trying to protect you. A burned out brain isn't a failing brain. It's a brain that's been trying to operate without the right support. And when you start giving it what it needs in the right sequence, it's remarkable how quickly things can start turning around. Okay, so now that you know your brain can repair, let's talk about the 3 biggest levers that make reset possible. And I want you to notice something here. These are not quick hacks. They're not trends. They're not just sleep more or just take supplements. These are the deeper biological forces that determine whether your brain stays in burnout or it finally comes back online. So we're going to stay high level here, but these are the levers that I look at in every single one of my clients who wants their clarity, energy, and motivation back. So lever number 1 is to identify what's overwhelming your brain cells. Most people spend years trying to boost their brain, but almost no one looks at what's draining it. And this includes things like chronic inflammation, toxin burden, poor gut-brain signaling, blood sugar swings, disrupted cortisol patterns, and even hidden food reactions. We talked about some of the big hitters today, but when these things pile up, your brain feels like it's constantly swimming upstream. So you can be doing so many things right, like eating well, exercising, and even taking medications, but if this internal noise is loud, your brain can't find clarity. So the very first step of a true brain reset isn't adding more. It's removing the overload. Most people skip this, and that's why they don't get better. Lever number 2 is rebuild what's missing. Once the overload quiets down, the next big lever is restoring what your brain has been missing. And I don't just mean general healthy habits. I mean the actual biological materials that your brain relies on to function. These are things like neurotransmitter building blocks, omega fats that support cell membranes, nutrients involved in methylation and detox, minerals that regulate mood and focus, the signals your circadian rhythm needs to reset, and even the right kinds of fiber for the gut-brain axis. And when you've been stressed or inflamed for a long time, these things tend to get depleted pretty fast. And here's the part that surprises a lot of people. You can do all of the right habits, but if your brain is missing core ingredients, you're still going to feel flat, distracted, unmotivated, or emotionally fragile. Your brain can only work with what you give it. And lever number 3 is to restore cellular energy. This is the game changer and the part almost no one talks about. Every single thought, memory, emotion, and task your brain performs requires energy. And that energy comes from your mitochondria, the tiny generators inside each cell. When mitochondria slow down, you feel it as that brain fog, the slow recall, the low motivation, feeling overwhelmed by simple tasks, trouble switching gears, and that mental fatigue even on easy days. But here is what I want you to hear loud and clear. Mitochondria respond incredibly well when the environment changes. They can repair, they can multiply, and they can ramp up energy production. But, and this is important, they need the first 2 levers in place to do that. You can't restore energy on top of inflammation. You can't optimize mitochondria if your gut is constantly sending distress signals. And you can't boost brain function if the building blocks are missing. This is why people spin their wheels. They try to supplement their way out or motivate their way out when the root causes haven't been addressed in the right order. But these 3 levers, reducing overload, rebuilding what's missing, and restoring cellular energy, are what create the internal environment your brain needs to reset. And the moment that environment shifts, your brain is incredibly quick to respond. People often tell me things like, "It feels like someone turned the brightness back up. My motivation came out of nowhere, and I didn't even realize how exhausted my brain was until it wasn't anymore." That's the power of working with your biology, not against it. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with something important, because if you've been dealing with brain fog, burnout, or that constant feeling of I'm not myself, it's really easy to internalize it. But I want you to hear this really loud and clear. You're not broken, you're not lazy, or losing your edge. Your brain is responding to the environment it's been living in, and the changes you've been feeling are the result of biology, not personal failure. But biology can be changed. Your brain is not stuck like this. It just needs the right sequence of support to come back online. So, if this video helped you understand why your brain feels the way it does, and you want to learn the next step, the actual framework for starting to reset your brain and take it out of burnout, I have a free masterclass that walks you through that. It's called the 4-step framework to beat brain fog, fatigue, and mood and memory struggles naturally. So if you want to go deeper into what we talked about today, you can find the link below this video. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. And you know what? Share this video with someone you think might need to hear it. And thanks so much. I'll see you in the next one.